Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Khalil Jahshan. I'm Executive Director of Arab Center, Washington, D.C. And I would like to welcome all of you, those of you who are here in person at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and hundreds more who are actually just joined us on Zoom in various corners of the world today. To participate in this very special symposium focusing on media coverage of current events in Palestine, and to commemorate specifically today the journalistic legacy of Shireen Abu Akleh, the uncontested icon of Palestinian journalism. I was personally honored to have had the opportunity to interact with Shireen on several occasions throughout her journalistic career. I remember distinctly meeting her for the first time in 1999. So, hate to reveal my age, but we met in Ramallah during the annual meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Palestinian Initiative for the Promotion of Global Dialogue and Democracy, known as Miftah. Shireen served in 1999, very few people remember that, as Director of the Media and Press Department at Miftah, which was founded a year earlier by Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, as the name implies, to focus on global dialogue and democracy. And I had the honor and continue to serve on the board of directors of Miftah. Frankly, I still remember Shireen's poise and advice to the board at that meeting. As expected, she was candid, composed, precise, substantive, and very professional, qualities that characterized her journalistic career throughout the following 2 decades beyond that. We're honored today that several members of the Abu Akleh family traveled to be here with us today. I would like to personally welcome her brother, Anton Abu Akleh, and her sister-in-law, Lisa, her niece, Lina, who's participating in the program. You will be hearing from her a bit later, and nephew, Victor, and her friend, childhood friend, Aline Hanna. Welcome, and thank you so much for traveling to be with us today. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to pass the microphone on to my colleague and friend, Yousef Munayyer, to preside over today's proceeding. Yousef, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Khalil. Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Yousef Munayyer. I'm the head of the Palestine-Israel program here at Arab Center, Washington, D.C. And on behalf of my colleagues at the center, I welcome you today to this important symposium. And thank you all for your attendance here in this room and on our online broadcast as well. We look forward to engaging with you all. I want to share with you a little bit about the genesis of this event. Last year in the spring, as it was becoming increasingly clear that the U.S. government was not going to take steps to hold Shireen Abu Akleh's murderers to account, I decided I wanted to hold an event in her memory here at the National Press Club, which would be an opportunity to not only to continue to highlight the need for accountability in her case, but to also focus on the importance of protecting Palestinian journalists and reporting the Palestinian story to the world. We're honored, of course, as Khalil noted, to have members of Shireen's family with us today. When we first conceived of this event, this was, of course, well before October of 2023, and the horrific war on the Palestinian people in Gaza, which we have seen unfold over the last several months. Over the course of this onslaught, the Israeli military has killed nearly 40,000 Palestinians that we know of, most of them non-combatants, injured and maimed many more, displaced hundreds of thousands, and pushed the entire population, half of whom are children, to the brink of starvation. Among those killed by the Israeli military in Gaza was a record number of Palestinian journalists. In fact, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, more have been killed just in the first 10 weeks of the war on Gaza than have ever been killed in a single country over an entire year. The targeting of Shireen Abu Akleh and her colleagues, whom the Israeli military spokesperson initially claimed were, quote, armed with cameras, and the failure to demand accountability for this killing paved the way for an open season on Palestinian journalists in Gaza. But it's crucial to remember that as shocking as some of these statistics are, these murdered journalists are not mere numbers. They are human beings. Each had a name, a family, and an impact on the world around them. We ask that you direct your attention to the screen at this time as we remember them. The thousands of people who have been killed and injured in this genocidal war are not its only casualties. Too often in the media coverage of this war on Gaza and of Palestine more broadly, objectivity, the facts, and the truth have been slain as well. I first met Shireen in 2010 when I had invited her at the time to speak here in Washington, D.C. on a panel about covering Palestine. By this point, at just 39 years of age, she had become a household name across the Arab world, bringing Palestine into their living rooms on a nightly basis, and she had covered the collapse of the Oslo Accords, the Second Palestinian Intifada and its brutal repression by the Israeli military, major wars on Gaza and on Lebanon, the daily grind of Israeli military occupation, and Palestinian legislative and presidential elections, as well as the Freedom Flotilla. She spoke then about the importance of centering Palestinian voices, speaking directly to the people of Palestine to tell their stories, and of the risks journalists face every day working under Israeli military occupation. She described these challenges at the time in detail, not with a sense of fear, but with a dutiful commitment to the profession of journalism and to getting the story out despite the risks. It is surreal to stand here today and to hold a similar event in her memory just 14 years later. And yet, doing so has never been more important. For all of these reasons, our symposium today will focus both on the risks to journalists telling the story of Palestine, as well as an assessment of media coverage of this war on Gaza and coverage of Palestine more generally. We are excited to feature a stellar list of speakers today, and you can read more about their biographies in your program. First, however, we will hear a message from Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, who has been an outspoken advocate on the issue of accountability for Shireen in the United States government. Due to the Senate being in session today and difficulties with scheduling, the Senator will be delivering this message via video. Please direct your attention to the screen again.
Hi, I'm Chris Van Hollen, and I'm proud to represent the great state of Maryland in the United States Senate. And I'm honored to join you as we gather to mark a solemn occasion, the 2-year anniversary of the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, a respected and revered Palestinian-American journalist. She was born into a Christian family in the West Bank town of Bethlehem, just 4 years after the Six-Day War, and raised both there and in New Jersey. She joined Al Jazeera in 1997 and stayed with the organization until she was shot and killed in her line of duty, reporting the facts from Jenin. I want to commend Arab Center Washington, D.C. and all who helped organize the symposium in her memory. Shireen loved her job, and she did it with courage and integrity. She was a standout, a once-in-a-generation reporter, a trusted and beloved voice in the Middle East and around the world. For over 2 decades, she covered stories of both trauma and joy, hope and despair. She provided close-up coverage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and became a symbol of perseverance and a role model for many. Her life was tragically cut short by a sniper's bullet, but we must make sure her story, her legacy, and her voice live on. At the time of her death, Shireen was in plain view, wearing a blue press vest, covering an Israeli military operation in Jenin on the occupied West Bank. Within hours of her death, then Prime Minister Bennett sent out a tweet claiming she had been killed by gunfire from, quote, armed Palestinians, unquote. That was not true. We must continue our fight to get justice for Shireen Abu Akleh and to hold those responsible accountable. We must do that for members of her family, like her beloved brother, Tony. We must do that for our fellow Americans, so they will know that their government will demand accountability when our citizens are killed in these kind of circumstances. And we must seek justice because if there is no accountability for killing journalists, then our promises to protect their right to bring us the facts ring hollow. President Biden has rightfully demanded that Russia return wrongfully detained American journalists Evan Gershkovich and Alsu Kurmasheva, and that Syria return freelance journalist Austin Tice. The Biden administration should devote similar energy towards seeking justice for American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Immediately after Shireen's death, Secretary Blinken stressed the need for accountability, saying, quote, "We are looking for an independent, credible investigation. When that investigation happens, we will follow the facts, wherever they lead. It's as straightforward as that," unquote. Well, it is now 2 years later, and we have not had an official, independent investigation. What we have seen is a series of independent reports from investigative journalists, outlets like the New York Times, Washington Post, the Associated Press, CNN, and Al Jazeera, that overwhelmingly contradict the narrative presented by the government of Israel, that Shireen was shot in a direct exchange of gunfire between an IDF unit and Palestinian militants. That is why I continue to push the Biden administration to make good on its demand for an independent investigation into the death of this American citizen. While there were hopeful reports some time back that the FBI was conducting an inquiry, they have not confirmed any such effort. We also know how difficult it would be to conduct such an investigation without demanding cooperation from the government of Israel. You may remember that after Shireen Abu Akleh's killing, Secretary Blinken also called upon the government of Israel to review the IDF rules of engagement in the West Bank. His request for such a review was ignored without consequence. I did succeed in pushing the Biden administration to undertake a comprehensive review of the existing record and the reports to conduct an analysis of what happened. And I want to commend the U.S. Security Coordinator for Israel and the Palestinian Authority, General Michael Fenzel, for completing such a report in May of last year. General Fenzel was not able to get access to key witnesses or evidence, but he did piece together a revealing account that provides critical insights into the conduct of the IDF unit responsible for killing Shireen, a report which raises critical concerns about the IDF rules of engagement. I reviewed that report as soon as it became available, and there is no reason, none, for it to be classified. That is why I have repeatedly called upon President Biden to declassify it in the public interest, and I renew that request again today. The report previewed many of the concerns that have surfaced regarding the IDF's loose rules of engagement in Gaza today, and its release might have served as an early warning sign. The recently passed FY24 appropriations bill includes my amendment requiring the State Department to brief Congress on that report, and I am in the process of scheduling that meeting now. If Shireen were alive today, she certainly would have sought to cover not only the terrible situation on the West Bank, but also the ongoing war in Gaza. I believe she would have been horrified by the brutal Hamas terror attack on Israel on October 7th that killed about 1,200 people and took over 250 hostages. And she would have been appalled by the ferocity of the ensuing Israeli onslaught against Gaza that has killed over 34,000 Palestinians, 2/3 of them women and children, who have nothing to do with Hamas. She would want to be there to bring the full truth to the world. That is what the journalists who are there have tried to do, at great risk to their personal safety. According to Reporters Without Borders, there have been over 100 reporters killed to date in the current Israel-Gaza conflict, including 2 killed by Hamas in Israel on October 7th and 103 killed in Gaza by the IDF. The Committee to Protect Journalists puts the figure at 97. By either measure, that is a staggering number of reporters killed. The Committee to Protect Journalists has said that the war in Gaza has been the deadliest period for journalists since they began gathering data in 1992. The reporters killed in Gaza have been mostly local Palestinian journalists, many of them freelancers operating with limited resources and no international support. They tried to keep themselves and their families alive through the very humanitarian catastrophe that they were reporting on. Like Shireen, they died working to bring the facts and the truth to the world. As we honor Shireen and all the journalists we have lost in the Israel-Gaza conflict, we also honor all those journalists and reporters who are still bravely putting themselves at risk to tell the story of what is happening. But we should not place the entire burden on the journalists who live in Gaza. Foreign journalists who are willing to put themselves at risk should be permitted to enter Gaza to report on what is happening. Earlier this year, more than 50 international journalists sent a letter to the Israeli and Egyptian governments asking to be allowed to do their jobs and provide independent reporting on the conditions in Gaza, saying in the letter that, quote, foreign reporters are still being denied access to the territory outside of the rare and escorted trips with the Israeli military, unquote. In December, Senator Schatz and I and 3 other senators wrote to President Biden asking that he, quote, urge the Israeli as well as the Egyptian governments to respect press freedom by allowing all interested journalists to report without restriction from Gaza, unquote. We also pointed out that, quote, the lack of transparency caused by limited journalistic access is at odds with the obligation all governments have to allow citizens to access factual information, unquote. I have also raised this issue directly with Egyptian President Sisi and Foreign Minister Shukri during my visit to Cairo and Rafah in January, and have raised it in meetings with Egyptian authorities since. Even if the government of Israel refuses to grant journalists permission to enter Gaza without IDF escorts from Israeli border crossings, I urge Egypt to allow journalists willing to take the risk to enter through the Rafah crossing. Despite the dangers it entails, journalists want this access. They want to be able to report the facts so the rest of the world can better understand the situation on the ground. A free press is necessary to prevent the abuse of power. Reporters are necessary to ensure full transparency and accountability. Just days ago, on May 3rd, we marked World Press Freedom Day at a time when authoritarian regimes around the world and those who want to suppress the truth are increasingly cracking down on free expression and an open press. It is more important than ever that we support journalists who bring us the facts on the ground, and we must do everything in our power to protect those who are reporting from conflict zones. That's what Shireen did. She reported from a conflict zone to bring the facts and the truth to people who would listen. She once said, quote, I choose journalism to be close to the people. It might not be easy to change the reality, but at least I could bring their voice to the world, unquote. Shireen is no longer with us, but her spirit of listening to people, especially those facing adversity, and telling their stories to the world, remains very much alive. There are those who may hope the passage of time will extinguish the flame of her memory. We must not allow that to happen. We must continue to pursue justice for Shireen in order to make clear that we will defend all those who seek to gather the facts and tell the truth, whether they be in Gaza or any other place in the world. Thank you.
We appreciate very much the Senator's comments and his continued commitment to transparency and accountability around the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh. We will now begin with our first panel session, coverage of the war on Gaza, what the Western media gets right and wrong. I invite our panelists to come up here to the stage. Thank you.